5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's more like it. Hello and welcome to Tim's BMW Repairs and Information. Well, since I did the last video about not using the sport button and using the steptronic control itself to get more power out of, well, get more performance out of the car, that was the most important thing. It wasn't getting more power, more performance, more controllable performance, especially on sharp corners. Now, since I put out that video, I've had so many comments saying that the sport button is a magic button that finds hidden horses in the engine. Yes, that button releases the horsepower from the engine apparently. Well, I don't think so, but I'd be happy to be proved wrong. And there's a good way to test. We'll do acceleration tests with 6 different modes. There's actually 6 different modes of accelerating away from a standstill. Standard mode, drive, gear stick in the middle. Second mode, sports mode, but not using the sports button. So that's number 2. Number 3 is manual control of the gearbox, so we can stick it in first, change gear ourselves. So that's 3 modes, and then all of that with the sport button on. So sport manual, sport auto, sport steptronic, sport manual. Yeah, so there's 6 modes. Yeah, it seems crazy, and we've got to try all of them. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to do acceleration from a standstill. I've got a camera on the dials, I've got a camera watching me, I've got a dash camera, and it's really just a case of me counting down, and off we go from the same space each time, from the same spot on the road each time. Now this is a little back road, and so we should be okay there, and you can see in front and behind. Only problem with it is it sometimes gets dirty and we might be traction limited, in which case the tests won't actually mean a great deal, but hopefully the road's okay. Well, it's muddy here, but hopefully when we get past this bit, then we'll be okay. Right, we're okay here. So now what I do is I start from somewhere safe where I can see both directions. Doesn't matter if it's uphill or downhill, we're going to do the same thing each time. Right, standard mode, no messing about, right at the hedge line. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, well, this is now Tuesday, so before we look at the footage, I need to explain a few things because it's taken 6 or 7 hours of editing to get to this point. It really has taken a bit of time. Right, first of all, I'm using 3 cameras. I've got one on the window up here, just to my right, and that looks at the instruments. And it's at a very acute angle, and that's important in a minute. And I've got a dash cam that's facing forwards, and I've got another camera that's looking at me. And when they go on to the editor, into the video editor, they're all synchronized. So all 3 cameras are exactly timed to each other to within a millisecond or so. So the way that I thought I'd do it is I'd watch the rev gauge in the footage, so I can blow up the rev gauge here, the instruments and so on, and the speedo, and wait until the dial hits 60 miles an hour, which is obviously up here. Now, when I did that, I was getting something like 6.2 seconds 0 to 60, and that isn't what a 6 Series do. It should be about 5 seconds. So I eventually worked out it was because it was such an acute angle to the dials that I'm actually seeing the needle in a completely different point in space to the dial. And actually what I thought was 60 miles an hour, it's actually 67 miles an hour. And I eventually worked out how to sort this out by driving the car in 2nd gear to 60 miles an hour, which is of course what's happening in all the footage here. And that's 6,000 RPM in 2nd gear equals 60 miles an hour. So from that point on, I could go by the rev gauge as long as I'm in the 2nd gear. And as soon as it hits exactly 6,000 RPM, that's 60 miles an hour. And I can also time the start of the timed period from when the rev gauge comes off the idle position. So I'm getting rid of the counting in problems and my reaction time. So I count in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I ignore the go bit and watch the rev gauge. And as soon as it comes off the stop, as soon as it comes off the bottom here, that's my starting position. And we'll go through first gear and second gear. And when we reach 6,000 RPM, that is 60 miles an hour. And I've double checked this. And that brought the times back down to something a lot more reasonable. So each of the runs is done as we are here. We're in the road and it's a dead straight road. It's dead flat. And I go east. This is the first one I'm going east. Turn the car around, go west, turn around and go east again. And I try it in all the different modes. I'm starting off in drive, so no buttons pressed, not Steptronic or anything like that. Give it a lot of welly. Well, of course, I lose traction straight away. So that's my first run, which was a complete waste of time. And the reason for that is that the entrance to this road is just covered with mud. So off I go and I lose traction here and I sort of give up. And now I'm in third gear. So you can see on screen, you can see the traction lights on. It's taken me 6.2 seconds to get to that's 60 miles an hour. No, it looks like it says 66 or something like that, but it isn't that. It's actually 60 miles an hour. The dial is actually on top of the 60. And I've double checked that when the rev gauge is at 6,000, of course, I'm in third gear now, which actually defeats the object. But there you go. Anyway, the first run, complete waste of time. So I'm in non-sport auto, so I'm just in drive, as though I just pulled away from the traffic lights. And so then I'll whiz up the road, I turn the car round, and I'll do exactly the same thing in the other direction. So here we go, standard mode, drive, non-sport auto, so exactly the same again. And what I do is I count myself in, and then what I do on the editor is that I find exactly when this comes off, and start counting from that point on. Lost traction there, 6,500 RPM. And there we go, 6,000 RPM there. So there we go. 5.2 seconds, 0 to 60 in drive. So that's a bit of a benchmark to start with. That gives us something to work on. And that's not far off what I'd expect. When I drive manually, you can usually do it in 5 seconds. Okie doke, so that's fine. Whiz down the end of the road, cyclists in the way, turn the car around without going through the mud, come back up to the trees again. And this time I'm in sport auto, so I've just pressed the sport button, but I'm still in drive. I hadn't knocked the Steptronic over to the side. And I do exactly the same again, count myself in. There we go, start the millisecond counter as soon as we go. And 6,000 RPM. 5.08. So we can say with some certainty that pressing the sport button makes you go faster than when you're just in drive. And that's fair enough. You'd expect the sports button to do something which is helping you by a few fractions of a second. Okie doke, so up to the end of the road, past the cyclists, moan about people throwing newspapers out of their windows, moan about the cyclists again, and off we go, back to the gate. And I'm in sport now, so I've pressed the sport button, I've pushed the Steptronic into sport, but not using manual gear changes. So off we go again. So let's start the thing running. So I'm at idle, and off we go. So it's taken 0.4 of a second to get up to almost 2,000 RPM. Lost traction there, 6,500, 6,000 on the nose, 5.48. And that's probably because we lost traction in the mid-acceleration phase. And that's really because of the sharpness of the gear changes. We're actually losing traction at this point. Okay, so sport, auto, go down to the end of the road, turn round again, and off we go back up to the tree line. So we managed to get 5.08, wasn't it? Something like that, with sport engaged, but the gearbox in standard drive. But this time we've got the sport button press, Steptronic push to one side, but not manual gear change, exactly as we did from the gate. So we do exactly the same again, just to double check our information. So off we go again. And 6 seconds. And 5.28, so slower this time. And I'm not sure if we lost traction that time. Let's just check. Go backwards again. No, we didn't lose any traction. So actually putting the sport button on and putting the gear stick into sport mode has lost us a little bit of time. Same as it did coming the other way. Can't exactly explain it. I would guess it's something to do with the harsh gear changes between first and second, but I don't know for sure. But it's certainly slower. So sport doesn't save you any time. Apart from that, it's horrible to drive anyway. The throttle's like an on-off switch. So this time I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go from the gate again. And this time I'm going to do gear changes as I do them in real life, which is non-sport. I haven't pressed the sport button, but I've gone into Steptronic and I'm going to manually change gears. And this is how I drive normally. So off we go again. Again, 6,500 and 4.92 seconds. So that really agrees with my thoughts on driving the 6 Series, is that having the engine and gearbox in sport mode, so sport button press, gear stick into sport mode, DS mode, whatever you want to call it, doesn't help you at all. It doesn't help you control the car's power. Whereas if you drive the car manually without the sport button pressed, then you've got much better control over the engine and gearbox and the traction, and you save time. So 4.92, that's a significant amount of time. Now, to make absolutely sure this is the case, I was absolutely fastidious in how I did the timing. I always did it so that it was when the rev gauge came off the stop and when we hit 6,000 RPM. So, yeah, it's taken half a second to get to 2,000 RPM. Pretty similar to the last run, which took longer time. And the millisecond timer starts exactly at the right time. We stop the timer exactly when it hits 6,000 RPM, and it's 4.92 seconds. So, okay, so what I thought I'd do is, well, that sort of agrees with how I feel about the car. Let's try it in sport mode. So press the sport button, put the Steptronic into Steptronic mode, put it into first gear, and I'll change gears manually. Surely that'll make it go faster. Unfortunately, before I can do that, I've actually got to cool the car down a bit, because we now are getting to a point where I'm not happy with the gear, with the oil temperature. Things are getting a bit hot, so I decide to just whiz round the road a bit. So I go off down the main road and back through the back lanes, but don't go through the muddy side. I go through the other side so I don't get the wheels muddy, and then whiz it back to the gate. So it's the same position where I got that 4.92 a second ago, and we'll do it from there. Okay, so back at the gate again, and we'll do exactly the same thing. So I've now got the sport button press, Steptronics into the sport mode, manual gear changes. So I'm going to be selecting gears manually, have a bit more control over the car. Surely that's going to go a bit faster than doing it in drive. That was my thoughts anyway. So I thought I'd give it a go. Sport, manual. Off we go. 6,000 RPM change. 6,000, 5.32. Yeah, unfortunately, it seemed to be even slower in manual mode. Other thing worth saying as well is that if you really are ragging the car like this, and I don't like accelerating in first gear at all, it puts a heck of a lot of strain on the drivetrain. And in manual mode, so not sport, steptronic and manually change gears, I much prefer that. You've got much more control over the revs. Now, although it will hit a stop at 6,500 RPM in first gear, in second gear, if you've got it in sport, it will go up to 7,000 RPM. And that's in the red. And the valves are starting to complain quite a bit about that. So, after going through all of this footage, and I was very fair about it as well. In fact, I wasn't sure which cut I was doing each time because all I was looking for is the rev gauge coming off of the stop and then waiting for the rev gauge to hit 6,000 RPM. I wasn't sure which one I was cutting in until they're all cut back into the video again, not forgetting that all the video is perfectly synchronized to a millisecond. So, yeah, I'm happy with the way I drive the car, to be honest. Yeah, you get more performance out of the car just using the steptronic gearbox than using all the sports buttons. The sports button doesn't give you any more power, which is what I tried to explain last time. Might feel like it is because the throttle response seems quicker, but that's only because the relationship between the throttle pedal and the engine power changes. You can push the throttle pedal an inch in normal mode and the throttle butterfly or the valve lift will lift a certain amount. Whereas in sport mode, you put the throttle down by an inch and it opens the throttle more or less wide out or lift the valve to the highest lift position. That might feel like you're getting more power, but you're not. You're really not. What you're doing is you're losing control. And you don't see saloon car racers going around the corner and putting the sports button on. No, you've got to learn the relationship between the throttle pedal position and the amount of power the engine is producing. And pressing the sport button loses that human interface. And that's the thing. And to control a car properly, you need to have the human interface of knowing how far to press the throttle so you don't lose traction on the rear wheels. So as soon as you do, DSC will cut in and you'll lose power and the light will come on and it may even put a rear brake on. So this is what I've always said. Don't use the sports button. Use the manual gearbox if you want to change gear, just like a manual car. Feather the throttle position to get the most power you can out of the car without losing traction, and you get much better times. And I think the proof is in the pudding, really. As I say, this was more or less a blind test. I didn't know which scene I was looking at until they're all cut and put back into the timeline. And yes, I mean, it's quite conclusive. And I did a quick sheet of what's happened. So these are the 7 runs. I did 7 runs in the end. First one was drive non-sport, waste of time, changed into 3rd gear. Second one was same again, but the road conditions were better, and it's 5.16, and that's not bad at all. Not bad at all for a 650. Next one, number 3, sport button, but in drive, so I just press the sport button, 5.08. So that's not bad at all. And that's the difference between drive non-sport and drive sport is 0.1 of a second or something like that. So run number 4, sport auto, so sport button press into sport, 5.48. Yeah, it really doesn't like that mode at all, and I really don't like it either because it gives you 7,000 RPM in 2nd gear, and that's getting very rattly, and you don't want to do that often. So sport auto to the west, sport auto to the east, 5.28. So it's getting worse. I'm not happy. I don't like the sound the card's making. Non-sport manual, so the sport button's not pressed. Steptronic to the left and push forward into first gear and then change gear manually. 4.92. And yeah, the proof's in the pudding. And just to do it, check it against sport manual. 5.32. You've lost a lot of time. So it might feel like you've got more power and you're having great fun on the corners in sport, but you're wasting time. And you're making it just a bit more, you're making it slower. And I don't have much fun in a car that's losing back end traction every couple of seconds when you're going around a corner. Much better to feather the throttle. Right, there we go then. Yeah, if you want full control and the best performance out of your 650, yeah, use the Steptronic box and manual gear changes. Don't press the sports button, it just turns the throttle into an on-off switch. You might think you're going faster, you're not. Well, the full footage is after this bit, but thanks very much for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Each time. Right, standard mode, no messing about, right at the hedge line. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, traction limited for a second there. 60, yeah, and a bit of traction limiting, so it'd be interesting to see that. Don't want to turn around in a farm. Actually, that bit of road might be better. I'll go to that instead. Who threw their paper out of their window, for goodness sake? Oh, you're in the air, you're doing fine. Right, I'm going to turn around in the road rather in than in a farmer's gate. Then we won't get mud on the wheels, should get better traction. Right, here we go, turning around in the road. All clear. Not sure if the car should just fit around there. Don't want to hit a blooming alloy. I've had enough trouble with alloys already so far. Right, here we go. Hopefully all that mud is off the wheels. Right, so we're going to start at the gate here. This sounds like a good plan, much better plan. So stop at the gate. Standard mode. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's more like it. 60. There we go. Bloke in the middle of the road on a push bike. Well done, mate. Just stay there, that's great. Right, got to turn around somewhere. Don't want to get the tyres all dirty again, but that's going to happen, I'm afraid. There we go. Right, we're round. Right, we're going to go from the same, with the low traction area here. So we'll go from the tree line, but this time in sports mode. Right, tree line, sports mode. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, lost traction again. And the bloody bicyclist's in the way again. Oh my God. Probably neutral. There we go. third mode, sport. So we're in sports mode, and the Steptronic box is in sports mode, but not manual mode. Okay, at the gate. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Traction limited. I'll come the other way. There we go. Righty-ho, so that was mode number 3. People are going to start wondering why I'm turning around every 5 minutes. There you go, can't win them all. Okay, from the tree line again in sport. Coming to a stop. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That goes pretty high revs, doesn't it? Yeah, and start losing traction in about 3rd gear. Oil temperature's starting to increase. Right, and I think I'm going to do the last one in the mode that I'd normally do it in. So we'll be in standard mode but Steptronic manual, because that's the one I'm happy with, and then we can have a look at the timeline and see in the editing suite and see which one was the fastest. There we go. Let the old engine cool down a bit. Needle doesn't usually go up that far. Should be cool enough by now. Right, so Steptronic manual. So that's what I'm going to go with this time, and I'll be controlling the revs. 1st gear. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's more like it. There we go. So yeah, be very interested to see if that was the same or faster. I have to go for a cooling down phase now, I think. The old oil temperature's getting up. And now what we're going to try is double sport but manual control, because I really didn't like hitting 7,000 RPM. That's well into the red. Yeah, so double sport manual this time. Tyres should be clean. The engine's cooled down again now. In we go, one more time. Here's the gate, right. Sport. Select 1st gear this time. 3rd, 2nd. Car coming, have to be quick. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Oh, it's got the old power in 2nd gear. There we go, we're up to 60. Well, I think we're traction limited to start with. I think that was the problem.